Is everybody happy? Cried the sergeant, looking up. Our hero feebly answered yes, and then they stood him up. He jumped into the icy glass, his static line of war.
You know, this may be controversial to say, but MRE heaters aren't as good as they used to be.
Yeah, they're horrible. Ah, flat tire.
No, the other ones just had too big of a lunch.
Valid point.
Lowest bitter. So me and my battle buddy came to do a mission, identified that I've got a flat tire. First, we're gonna go ahead and troubleshoot it to make sure that it's not just something wrong with the CTIS, that it didn't just leak out through the back, and it's something that starting it and running the air in can fix. Afterwards, we're gonna determine whether or not we actually have to change the tire, and we're gonna show you how.
Once the system is full of air, it will begin to push air into the tire based on the setting that the controller is in. Mine is set to highway. You'll see the red LED on the controller flash on one setting if it's working to build that air up. If all 5 LEDs are flashing, it's a fault in the system, but that rarely means that's how you're losing air because the wheel has a one-way valve on it. If you're not on good terrain to change the tire, press the emergency setting and slowly drive to flat and solid terrain. When the tire has reached the mode set tire pressure, the LED will remain solid on.
So there's no leaks in our CTIS hose. Don't hear any air rushing out of it. We're gonna look behind the tire. Here's your main CTIS hose coming out of the hub. And then we can follow it going up underneath to the frame to where its blowout valve is. And we can tell there's no air leaking out. It's not the CTIS that we can tell so far. If your CTIS was faulty and not working, we could manually inflate our tires using a hose out of our BII.
After the air line is coupled to the red emergency air and you have the air hose ready to use, press in the red trailer brake in the cab to supply the air to it, not the truck brake, because then the truck will roll. Use very soapy water and either spray or pour on the tire slowly like so. If there is a hole, you will see small bubbles forming. Roll the truck forward as needed to get to the other side of the tire. I like to start with putting the spare tire down first so that I'm not shaking the truck too much while it's on a jack. Squeeze the lock release handle to open the ratchet and pull the handle up into its lockout slots so that the strap can be pulled loose.
There we go.
Make sure it stays in those lockout slots. The truck doesn't have to be running to bring the spare down, but many would agree it helps prevent other issues. Pull up on the passenger side flap and flip up the 2 left switch covers. Flip up the left ignition switch and wait for the truck to run its pre-start cycle. Once the clicking stops, use the middle switch to start the truck. Once running, open the control box and hold down on the spare tire control. Assist the spare tire down because it gets hung up sometimes on the BII box, but never get in front of it as it comes down in case it drops. Get that chain off, it should only be hand tight, then roll that heavy beast up out of the way to a safe place.
So I've got my jack, I've got my lug wrench, and I've got my extension handlebar. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna break these bolts loose before we jack it up so that we're not moving the truck really hard, trying to torque those lug nuts off. So the first thing that we're gonna take off is this CTIS hose. You only have to disconnect the one side to get the wheel off, leave the thin side.
I love having this speed up control. You can never forget which one is the right hose because the lug nut's underneath it.
So now that we have the hose off, you can see that we can get to the lug nut. Oh, Jesus. So in order to use your jack, you have a little slot at the tip of your handle. You're gonna make sure that it's nice and tight. Then we're gonna screw out the top part. So some of your jacks are gonna come with this flat plate. This flat plate would go up underneath your axle on top to prevent this from slipping off. Now we're up underneath the truck. We are gonna place the jack directly up underneath the axle. So here's our axle. I'm gonna go right inside this little pit area so that it gets a brace. Make sure that you're positioned so that your handle is accessible. Don't have it facing the tire.
Here we go.
Pro tip, the less you jack it up, the less you have to pick it up.
Work, everybody doing it right. All work, work, work.
when you pull the spare tire down, it's gonna have an actual metal factory nut on your banjo bolt for your CTIS. You're gonna have to pull your 10-inch and your 12-inch out.
Put this bolt back in the tire you just took off, that way you don't lose it.
So we can see that they're not aligned. Get it up on top of this and just rotate it. Make sure that your CTIS hole is lined up and then push on. Thank you. One is special and different. This is your CTIS one. Now we've gone around and we've just hand tightened them. Now we actually have to do what we call a star pattern, so that whenever you tighten up one lug nut, it pulls it into the center and then it evens it out at the one directly below it and then pulls evenly as they tighten. So I'm going to start with my CTIS bolt because it's the most unique, it's the easiest one to remember where I started. So we placed our chalk block in the front so that it would cut down on the rolling. If you do this on the rear axles, they won't roll as much because the brakes are constantly on for the park brake.
Don't you dare click away. I'm only gonna do a few bolts. You don't have to watch me do them all.
Hard work, earn my pay. Hard work, do it every day. Hard work, get up out of 2:45. Hard work, ready to go and earn my pay. Hard work.
Here's the gasket ring for your banjo bolt. You want to make sure all this paint's off of it. You want to make sure that it's clean, no grease, dirt, debris. This has to hold air in. Take your banjo bolt, push it through. Now I have the one at the back of the bolt. I'm going to take my banjo bolt, place it through, and then your interior ring slides on the interior of the banjo bolt. Now here's the important part. Hold it tight, push it straight in so that it doesn't cross thread. Only use your hands at first. Wiggle it around if you have to, move it however you need to, but make sure that you have this threaded in by hand first. These cross thread and strip very easy. You can already see how I'm struggling. There we go. Now I have it threaded in as far as I can get it by hand. As these trucks get older and get a little rusty, it might be a little more difficult by hand. Use wire brushes to clean the threads if they're available. Use some CLP on the threads to help you get it in there. It's not gonna cause any harm, but make sure you get at least 5 solid turns in here, no matter what the rust is, so that you don't cross thread this or strip the threads. You do not have to tighten this thing like you're worried about it falling off. Just give it a nice wrist tight and let that be it. Before I even let my jack down, or before I put my spare up, I'm gonna start the truck.
To allow the CTIS to build up the air pressure in that tire. Once this flashing light turns solid red, it's good to go.
Now it's time to take our bottle jack out from up underneath, put all of our BII away, and call it a day.
Always tighten the release bolt on your bottle jack so that that fluid doesn't leak out from inside. Once the spare tire gets up in its storage rack, you're going to have to wiggle it around a little bit to make sure that it gets all the way to the back. Put your straps on neatly and don't forget your safety chain. And it's paperwork time, yay! You can see that I had in the item number 11 Bravo .1, that's item number 11, the before section of the PMCS, and then the first check of that, and it was a deadline because, well, it was inoperable. Now I changed it because we fixed it, we replaced it, and now it's 1 mic, 1 monthly, and it's the second check of that, and I used the spare tire to fix it. Now you're not done yet. Once you get back to the motor pool, this thing has to see a mechanic so that all those bolts can get torqued down to their proper specs. Then they won't come loose when you go down the road one day and fall off, or cause vibrations in the steering system from a loose wheel. These marks going from the lug nut to the wheel itself are supposed to indicate to you that one of your lug nuts is coming loose. Put one check next to another safely completed mission, back into the motor pool with our paperwork updated so we can get a new spare tire, and that truck prep for the next mission so we can complete it safely. Get a couple more miles towards that driver's badge.
Alright troops, so we've gone over if we were in a field environment, how to utilize the BII to change this truck's tire. Then as far as troubleshooting, we showed how to troubleshoot it. We found that it wasn't the CTIS, but it was a hole in the tire. There's my class for the day. Let me know in the comments section what you thought of this one, and if there's anything else you want to see in the future.
He counted long, he counted loud, he waited for the shock. He felt the wind, he felt the cold, he felt the awful drop. The silk from his reserve spilled out and wrapped around his legs, and he ain't gonna jump no more.